these groups got together, members of civil society, leadership in the police force, the constabulary, academia, and very importantly, political leaders and political activists. And there were a number of different spaces in which they were looking at crime and violence in Jamaica, and there was a clear political linkage. The state of communities and the problems that would have for development, yes. And the fact that there were these pockets or garrisons where political choice was impeded and was directed by political strongmen. And there was a sense that people did not believe that the aspirations of the 1930s and of the early 1960s were being honored and were being realized. So those who died in the strikes and the protests, the people who started the first political parties, the people who negotiated with London for independence, all of that, it seemed, we were now burning, yes, all of that. Yes. And so there was a great concern because I think people felt that's not who we are.
Yes, yes.
Well, the trouble with fire is that once it starts, you know, it just takes a little match to spark it.
Only takes a spark to get the fire going.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's the positive one, but
yes.
so often it's on the negative side.
Yes, yes.
So that really generated a sense that we were almost becoming an international laughingstock or pariah.
Yes.
Here we are, a young, independent country with everything going for us, with the most beautiful people in the yes. world, talent, creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. And we were just stumbling.
Yes, I want to bring you back there, yes. because people who just born
yes.
might not have a real appreciation of it, because I can only recall myself that in 1980 it was not a watershed but a bloodshed.
Yes.
The ground was soaked
yes.
with blood. Where were you at the time?
You know, I'm trying to remember exactly where I was because I was called to the bar in 1981. So I was back in Jamaica, but in the years leading up to that, 2 years before, I was in Barbados for 2 of the worst years
yes.
that we had preceding that. And to be in university at that time with a lot of optimism.
Yes.
We still believed the world was our oyster. But added to that was a sense of mission and duty.
Yes.
That somehow we have a role to play in what is going on in our country. And I was very conscious too that it was more an urban, particularly the capital
yes.
problem, than in the rural areas, although there were several outrageous incidents in that period in rural parts. But, you know, for the most part, and then although I was at university, again, you're in a protected space. You know, I lived at the theological seminary, you walk through the back gate, yes. you're on campus. Everything is provided in that little space, so you didn't really
in a bubble.
have to be, we were living in a bubble.
Yes,
and
yes.
when I go home to the country to my parents' farm, I'm in another bubble.
Yes, yes.
But there were many people who were living it.
Even on the edge.
Morning, noon, and night. They were waking up to not knowing whether they can go out their gate or not.
Yes, that was the Jamaica. That was
yes.
the reality at the time,
right.
that you woke up every morning to see the amount of persons who were killed
yes.
the day
yes.
before,
yes.
expecting another body count the day after. That's where we're coming from.
Yes.
Would you say that helped to spawn, if you may, the idea of a political ombudsman?
Absolutely. I think people felt that politics is the way in which we make decisions about how our country is to be. So the political space was very, very, very important to grapple with and come up with a plan of action. I think it was appreciated that the political parties had in some way been captured by their own desire for leadership and their supporters' notion that, you know, anything is okay.
Yes. Might I ask, that was there international influence? Because there was a time where we appeared as if Jamaica was being the satellite of either the Soviet Union or Washington, D.C. Did that play a game at that time? Was it a part of the context?
It absolutely was. I mean, I think the world was a totally different place. I think the Cold War that you have brought into play, young people now are seeing some level of how do these powers accommodate one another on the world stage? How do they build trust? Should they trust one another? You know, is it trust but have your weapons ready, or is it trust and dialogue towards something? And so that definitely was the context. We had a bad reputation outside. Our Jamaicans who lived outside and our Jamaicans who lived on the rock had a great sense of insecurity and uncertainty. But I think added to that, and perhaps in a way more importantly, there was a growing group of people who were academia and early civil society who were very much driven by this idea that we can fashion something that's worthy of us. And we had politicians who felt that they too were ashamed of where we were and they didn't want to be there. Yes. And they were willing to have the problems aired. Yes. And to talk with people who traditionally were not at the table. And I think that started a very good, relatively long tradition of engagement between political actors, private sector, civil society, communities, and academia, yes. Which could continue to benefit us today.
The trust deficit that appeared on the world stage marked our years when we just had the blood yes. spreading all over. Yes. Have we dealt with this trust issue sufficiently, you think?
It's quite unfortunate that I think in 2018, as I said at a recent workshop, there is only a modest amount of trust in the political system and in political actors. In fact, I think the La Pop survey that was done, which would have covered, I think, up to 2016 or 2017, had, you know, like in excess of 70% of people who do not trust the system. The first La Pop survey about 6 or 8 years ago actually had 87% of the population saying you can't be too careful who you trust.
Wow.
And so, you know, this trust deficit is a real barrier to development, and it also promotes a more clientelist approach yes. to being a citizen.
Yes.
And
yes.
we don't want that. We want to be owners of the state, not yes. clients of the state.
Indeed. Might I just take you back to the history, because we want to develop the program as we go on, as yes. we take a deeper insight into the formation of what it is, what it should be, and what it is likely to be. Mm-hmm. Would you envy the first ombudsman and his job at that time? You think of yourself in that space at that time when we were guns drawn at each other and coming in then to fashion some kind of, yes. let's be peaceful here.
Yes. Well, we had a parliamentary ombudsman, Mr. Justice James Carr, who was not so much involved in the political but more in the governance yes. level, dealing with government. But in 2002,
yes.
the first actual political ombudsman, Bishop Blair, yes. was appointed.
Help me now with the parliamentary ombudsman versus the political ombudsman. Right. What would be the role of the parliamentary vis-a-vis the
So
political?
The idea of ombudspeople is an ancient Chinese idea, and in more modern times a Scandinavian idea. The actual word ombudsman comes from, you know,
and I
Western
like the term
Europe.
ombudspeople.
Thank you so much.
Like
or as colleagues of a certain person I know describe me, the political ambience.
Political ambience.
Yes.
Another nice touch.
I love that one.
Yes, yes.
So the ombudsperson is a neutral intervener to whom people can bring complaints, who will investigate and will make recommendations to the relevant entities for action.
Yes.
So in Jamaica, for example, we have a number of ombuds. We have, they're called commissions of parliament. So for example, INDECOM is a commission of parliament. It's an ombuds office. The Integrity Commission, the Public Defender, the Children's Advocate, all of these, the Electoral Commission, to some degree, yes. and my own office now, the Office of the Political Ombudsman. So these are all bodies set up reporting to Parliament, not to a ministry
Yes.
So it's not reporting to
Important
the government,
distinction.
is right.
And the parliament is made up of opposition and government.
Precisely.
Yes.
So that we are expected to be neutral experts or with specified roles in relation to issues of concern to Jamaica.
Yes.
So when Bishop Harold Blair became the political ombudsman, I had the privilege at the time to be the vice chair of the Peace Management Initiative, which came into
That's
effect
how you
at the
came to
time.
Jamaica in terms of knowing your
Well,
profile.
it certainly, well, I would like to give GIS that credit, actually.
Really?
First, yes, or maybe Schools Challenge quiz.
There you go. Well,
Go
now
very
you're
far
talking.
back, yes. So that had me very, very active because violence, death, these were really the hallmarks of the agenda that the ombudsman had to deal with in the person of Bishop Blair.
Okay.
So the Peace Management Initiative was an idea that said we could bring citizens with certain competencies to the table to think about designing different interventions to address that. I was the CEO of the Dispute Resolution Foundation at the time.
Yes.
And we developed a whole menu of interventions in support of what the political ombudsman was doing. And, you know, we had people like Barish Evans, Horace
The
Levy
late Barish
were on
Evans.
this, yes. And in fact, what was interesting about the design of the PMI is that there was representation from the two major political parties.
Yes.
And in fact, Paul Burke and Desmond Mackenzie were the
originals,
first
yes.
representatives on it, one representing JLP, one the PNP.
They were firebrands of their
They
own time.
certainly, they were in and out of meetings and I guess continue to be. But they had a passion for solving the problem of the hurt
Yes.
that our citizens were experiencing.
I'm going to ask you to hold on because I'm enjoying this too much. So let's take a break as it is designed. You're on Insight and we're talking to the political ombudsperson. We'll be right back on Insight. Welcome back to the Insight Politics topic, and we have the political ombudsman, political ombudsperson, political ambiance, all kind of derivatives, and we have to come up with this ombudsman thing. Perhaps not going to work in this 2018, you know. So we need an amendment to that. But we're going to talk about amendments to come. But what we're trying to do is get the history of Jamaica at that time, to take you back in time. And if you weren't there, to bring that time back to you, because it's important to understand the context of why things were developed. People didn't go off on some kind of a fanciful journey. Right. But here we are on the journey with the first ombudsman that you met him. You were working with the PMI and how you deal with matters opposed to going to the courts and not fighting and not dying. His job at the time, how did you feel? His task must have been an onerous one.
It was an onerous task. And I think it's important to understand that even though an institution exists, even though we believe we need an institution, that does not mean that we are happy when the institution acts.
You'd rather stay dormant.
So that if you are the person or your organization is affected by even an inquiry of the institution, then that creates a level of pushback, tension, anxiety.
Yes.
And in some ways that's a good thing that there is tension and anxiety, because it means that one recognizes the importance of the moment.
Yes.
But it also then made it very important for the ombudsman to be both strong and sensitive.
Yes.
So the idea is not to run roughshod over people, even if you think they may have breached in a most egregious way, the code, but really to make sure that you investigate so that you know whether there has been a breach or not a knee-jerk reaction to anything that somebody sends you. And I know Bishop had to deal with that quite a lot. In the communities where we were seeing what we would have considered political violence, also at that time, it was not necessarily connected back to a political leader. Yes. So let's say in a particular constituency, there's an area, and we know there's a border, and there's war going on between people of different political persuasions. In Bishop's time, too, some of those were actually criminal actions.
Yes, shouldn't even be brought to him.
Right, and some of them were criminals using the cover of politics. Some were wrongdoers who had a political identity, and the political identity was so important to them that that really explained all of their interactions.
Sounds like a lot of nuances.
It was a very nuanced situation, and that is why our emphasis was not on the role of the politicians in trying to negotiate different results among these wrongdoers, but it was that individuals who are seated at the table have certain issues and challenges and have done certain things. How do we move that along?
Yes.
The politicians were on the PMI itself, so they were aware that their names and the names of their organizations were being called or implicated or attached to conduct, and they too were opposed to that.
Yes. Let me delve into you a little bit, because you took the baton from...
Well, not exactly, because there was a hiatus of about 2 years.
Yes,
Bishop Blair left.
Said enough is enough.
In 2013, the post became vacant.
Yes.
And it remained vacant until November 2015, when I took up the appointment by His Excellency, the Governor General.
Okay, so you took the baton after it fell? No, it didn't fall. I'm trying to come up with the image.
It was on a little shelf.
It was on a shelf, but the race had to continue.
Right.
Historically, it had to continue. It had stopped, because 2 years, that's a stop.
People become unaccustomed.
That is correct. That is correct. From the position of where you were sitting at the time, and looking at the, why on earth did you apply for this job?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because this is not a job for which you apply. And I wasn't even aware of a...
Headhunt you.
Right, basically. Yes. Somebody, you're nominated. I guess there's some process between the political parties and the Governor General, and based on his inquiries and what the recommendations of the government and the opposition, then he would make a decision. And he invited me, and I spoke with him, and it seemed a good thing. Interestingly, I'd gone through a similar process earlier in the year, when I was invited to be the Custos of St. Andrew. And again, this was a situation where I had not given absolutely no thought. I didn't seek it out. I was working in a couple of different spaces, which I think caused people to see what I was doing and how I was handling it.
Your even-handedness.
I sincerely believe.
I sincerely believe that too. I will tell you, you are even-handed. Yes. So you accept that and move on, ma'am. No dispute.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so tell me, the little girl, Donna Parchment.
Yes.
Tell me about her, because we want to know because this is a position until you decide to retire. You don't have a remit at time, 5 years like government.
Well, there's a 7-year contract. There's a power to renew for a further 5 years.
Okay. Can you serve unending if they see fit, if you feel fit? Okay. So it doesn't have to come to an end. So I'd like to think you'll be here until this program isn't here anymore.
Well, this program will be here a long time. It's a great program. Thank you.
Help me. The little girl.
Yes.
Tell us about her. Where'd she come from?
Yes.
Well, you tell about a family farm.
Yes.
So you must be a country girl.
Well, I love talking about, this thing. I'm the first of 9 children.
Wow.
My father, Hilton Parchment, my mother, Rosetta Parchment. And we had a wonderful time in our farm, Watchwell, Ridgepen, St. Elizabeth.
Okay.
And, my grandparents lived up in Elderslie, so we'd be regularly going up to Elderslie. All my aunts and uncles and cousins lived nearby. So it was a very warm, embracing environment.
Yes.
I lived with my aunt, who was my mother's younger sister, for a few years before I went to high school.
Which high school? You have to talk the tribalism thing, that's important.
Let me say, the school that says for its motto, summa virtute et humanitate.
Well,
With the utmost courage and courtesy. That's Hampton School for Girls in Malvern.
Okay. I've a lot of friends went to Hampton.
Sure.
You know, so
and this is the 160th anniversary that the school is celebrating this year. So it's been serving a long time.
Yes.
You know, I had a fantastic time at Hampton. I was aboard. I met some really wonderful ladies from, you know, all over Jamaica and other countries.
Yes.
And we were well taken care of, you know, as boarders. And we also learned how to interact with new people.
Yes.
You know, when you're living in a dormitory with 8 other girls,
yes,
with only a cloth curtain occasionally pulled in between, you know.
Well, most privacy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You learn how to maintain and how not to value too much privacy.
Right.
And when you have the big Egypt bathroom and Nurse Whitty Hyman is knocking on the door and saying, you may turn on the showers now, and you turn on, and then she says, turn off. Because,
that's enough water.
Right, now, exactly. We had huge water problems.
Yes.
You know, the one Majuba tank to supply the school.
Yes.
So we also learned to, you know, to do what was needed.
Yes. And you, like most of us, will say that your high school years formed you.
Oh, they were very important for my life. You know, I come from a huge, loving, caring, supportive family. Hampton was also a loving environment. Going in as a first former, you had a third former as a mentor, right? So you'd be greeted by somebody who would help you settle in.
Yes.
I couldn't comb my hair. Bigger girls would comb your hair for you, you know, this sort of thing.
Wow.
I mean, I'm wearing an afro now. Then I didn't have an afro, but I had the same hair.
And a beautiful afro today, especially in the days when everybody's doing everything else today. Here it stands out. But you moved on and you went to law school.
Yes, I went to university.
How did that happen? Why law?
You know, I always, maybe my music teacher is to blame for that. You over there, you better go and become a lawyer.
Ooh.
Argue too many points.
Oh, there you go, there you go. You
Always have some defense for whoever is being
Isn't that what they call critical thinking now?
Thank you. Please.
Isn't that what PEP is going to?
Why are you taking me there?
Well, that's
critical thinking is really so important. And I mean, there are lots of great exponents of critical thinking in Jamaica. Yes. How to make it commonplace.
Yes.
And part of that is about openness. You can't have critical thinking if you're not hearing what others are saying.
Thank you very much.
If it's only what you say and know that dictates everything, then we already lost critical thinking going through the
I'd like to
world.
say you come to the conversation with your idea and you left with your idea. You didn't learn a thing.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so critical thinking is thinking outside of the cage.
How nice if you could leave your idea in the room and go away with something
somebody
better.
else. Yes.
A composite of, you know, these
Yes.
thoughts.
So you went off to Barbados, it was?
Yes.
Yes.
Actually,
Then it was Barbados.
funnily enough, I did government for the first year.
Okay.
And then I transferred to law.
Okay.
And went to Cave Hill. And the year I did government, I lived at the United Theological College at the West Indies, which was just fabulous.
Yes.
All of these ministers in training and deaconesses in training. And we had music, we had theater, I played volleyball, we had these conversations in the dining room that would go until midnight, you know.
Yes.
Ministers like to talk and lawyers like to talk, so it was just
unto
fabulous.
doctors and lawyers and ministers, right? Just to catch the three of you. So you spent how many years in
2 years in Barbados. It was just wonderful.
What did you do after that, right out of?
Out of Barbados, well, you then came back to Jamaica for another 2 years. That was law school.
Okay.
Because remember, legal program is 5 years.
Yes.
And within that 5-year program, you have to do the internship, where for a summer, you work with a legal organization of some sort.
What kind of law did you do?
I had a general practice, and straight out the gate, I was fortunate to be taken on at Milholland, Ashneim and Stone. It was a very, very, very distinguished law firm that later merged with Duncox.
Yes, all right.
Yes,
All
and
right.
I learned a lot from those folks.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to break you there, because when we come back, we're going to get into what the ombudsman or ombudsperson is all about. That was the easy part. Now comes the hard part. On Insight, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Insight. The political ombudsman is our guest, and we want to ask her right away, what's the value of the ombudsman's office? What is your remit? What are you about?
The Office of the Political Ombudsman is a commission of Parliament, and I want to go to the legislation to help answer that. So the Political Ombudsman Interim Act was passed in 2002.
Still an interim act?
And yes, and let me tell you why it's an interim act. It's an interim act because according to Section 3, this act shall continue in force until provision is made in the Constitution.
Okay, so
For the establishment
it's
of
not entrenched in the, or it's not in the Constitution,
No.
whether entrenched or deeply
Right.
entrenched.
So all of these commissions of Parliament are intended to be part of the constitutional
Okay,
apparatus
okay.
of the country.
So until then, it remains interim.
Until then, it remains fully functioning, but the act is an interim act.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it's really a flag that says, job not finished.
Okay.
Until you put it in the Constitution.
Would you like to see it finished?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely, because I think that the architecture of governance is very important to building confidence and trust in the public. The kinds of questions and calls and comments and feedback that I get from people tells me that people want to know that somebody is looking at what politicians are doing, and somebody is needed to speak up in the public space, but also somebody is needed who can speak with the political actors about the concerns, so that we may have a better country, so that our democracy may be more embedded. Because while the great electoral process is important for democracy, I recall that on the day of the signing of the code, I want to quote what Bruce Golding says. He says, conduct of party functionaries in and out of elections.
In and out of
In
elections.
and out of elections. And, the act that I'm speaking of and sharing with Jamaica, and, I remember when I was a girl, my father gave me a copy of Jamaica's Constitution. Every one of us should have one.
Yes.
We need to own the stuff that informs us about our rights and powers. So at Section 12 of this law, it sets out the functions of the Ombudsman. So, investigate any action taken by a political party, its members, or supporters, where the Ombudsman is of the opinion that the action, A, constitutes or is likely to constitute a breach of any agreement, code, or arrangement.
So you can be proactive.
I can be proactive. I don't have to wait on a report.
So a lot of people can be confused about that because you didn't get a report, but you of yourself might cite something, and you're able to offset that by going in.
And some people may look at what I think and say, I'm nitpicking. Yes, because their idea is that I saw it go. Everybody do it and never really mean anything. But the trouble is that the action may not only breach an agreement or breach the laws of Jamaica, but it may prejudice good relations between the supporters of various political parties. People might say that's so naive, but what optimism, what a positive thing, that we are creating a law that says we don't want you to behave in a way that prejudices good relations.
I want to take you back to the need for it to be in the Constitution.
Yes.
Because it's an interim act.
Right.
And you're saying that you think it should go there.
Right.
But tell me, in a manner, what's the difference? Does it protect the Ombudsman's office in a stronger way, that it's not up to political football?
Exactly. That's precisely it. The things that are protected in the Constitution require specific actions in Parliament to change. And that's why a number of things get protected there. The other thing is, if you look, for example, at the term of my contract, a 7-year contract in the first instance, so that on a change of administration, there is no entitlement to remove the holder of the office. But the holder of the office, whoever that may be, is protected for a period of 7 years. In fact, the position had been taken by Cabinet that it was important to continue the office of the Ombudsman, hence my appointment in 2015, because it would have been quite easy after 2013 to never appoint another ombudsman. Don't go to the trouble of changing the law, but just leave it vacant. But both major political parties agreed to the Governor General appointing a new ombudsman in 2015. And so that's for the next 7 years.
What will it take to get there?
To get it into the Constitution?
Yes.
I think there are a number of things, my office and a number of other commissions and entities, that really there needs to be a concerted effort to say, this is what we believe is an appropriate architecture of the state. So let us ensure that what we commit in one piece of legislation, we carry forward.
Are you saying the political parties of Jamaica are fine with it there, but they lack the will?
I don't think it's high on their priority list vis-a-vis many other things. And, you know, this is one of the challenges, that bread and butter issues, matters dealing with safety and security of the person, these are front of mind, and we want them to be front of mind of our political leaders and front of mind of our citizenry. However, it is when the thing that we choose not to carry forward sometimes comes back, and that's where we have the problem. So let us say there is no one who has a duty to shine a light on certain behavior. The media shines a light. We have seen a very, very active PAC in recent times. We have seen during election periods lots of complaints from both political parties regarding the actions of others. Not so much in the crime and violence area, although there has been some of that. But there is a shift towards a more subtle, but perhaps more dangerous, no, let me not say more dangerous, but very dangerous thing, which is in 1997, we said corruption was embedded in Jamaica.
Yes.
In 2018, people say corruption is flourishing.
Yes.
At all levels in Jamaica. And the question is the state apparatus sufficiently protected to give to the post holders in the different entities the strength that they need to fully address these issues? Because the mandate is to investigate, but the mandate goes further to then provide recommendations to the party leaders, right? So when you provide recommendations to the party leaders, the expectation of the thinkers at the time, based on the common concern about the state of play in Jamaica, would be that a party leader would take hold of the recommendation and make sure, unless there was some defect in the recommendation, that they were on the same side as the ombudsman in carrying forward the issue.
Apart from it being in the Constitution, which would protect the holder of the office and the office itself,
right?
That's my understanding. What else would you like to see? Because we often hear that the ombudsman's office lacks teeth.
Right.
That you blame and shame, is that the term?
That's name and shame.
In other words, you need a strong media to help you name and shame by carrying out. But what do you have in law when you say take down those flags, take down those things? Because that seems to be the greatest one that they don't bother with your office.
The most obvious one.
The most obvious ones.
Yes.
What else would you like to have to see going forward? I was going to leave this for the last part of the program, but I have to go there now because it's burning in my stomach.
Well, you know, I'm happy you've gone there, because the truth is there is vast compliance with the taking down of campaign material, but there remain several, remember, 60 constituencies.
Yes.
Right, so in a general election, you're looking at, is it 60 or 63?
Well, it's 63 now.
63, right?
That's right.
So it's 126 candidates
Yes,
at a minimum, and sometimes, you know, it could be 140 candidates in a general election.
Yes.
So when you think about what goes up in the election time compared to what is there when the election is over, there is substantial compliance, but there are some outstanding egregious cases of individuals. So for example, we have had huge billboards up for extended periods, And I've had to write again, speak to, and eventually I've seen them come down.
Are they not supposed to have, give me
14 days.
Yeah, 14
days after the election.
You're
and
supposed
no
to take
more than
them
3
down.
months before, yes.
No more than 3 months
Right.
before.
And 40 days after.
14 days, yes.
And it's the Town and Country Planning Act. So on a few occasions, I've been able to get the city managers who have the duty of the Town and Country Planning Act to assist me in the removal of huge billboards. Because remember, there's a waiver of the fee for the board for the politician in that period.
Ah.
So when your board is up outside of that period, technically you should be paying to the town and to the planning authorities X dollars, like anybody else. If we're having a dance, a church meeting, a function, I've been a bit concerned that I just had a letter from an MP who I've been having a lot of communication with, quite strong communication regarding his campaign material, which has remained and remains up, and he gave me various reasons why he was having challenges. And then suddenly I get a letter from him saying he needs my help in getting the material down, because when he takes it down, people put it back up.
You name him, no help me.
Not today.
Not today?
Because I've not responded to the letter
Okay,
yet.
because I can help him get it down by putting the camera on it and say, this is the person.
Yes.
But we promise to follow up on that one?
Yes.
Yes, because we have to not name and shame, but just name and bring it down.
Sometimes, yes, because certainly where a person says, it's not me, it's my supporters. And I've had to say to a number of persons, anything that is done for your benefit and in your name, you're accountable.
Yes.
Don't tell me I didn't give them any money, I didn't give them any fabric, I didn't give them any sign.
You were saying
tacit.
there's common design.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's tacit or direct participation in that. But of course, why we talk about this material is because the public gets so aggravated when they see it, and it carries over. But there has been, I do believe this is one area in which we have had substantial compliance.
What area do you think you have most of them bucking at your office and not complying?
I think there are two major areas of concern, perhaps three. The first one is very difficult to prove. So people have provided me with different material in the past, a truck back with a picture of money being handed to different people coming, but nobody to come and say it was a bundle of $5,000 and T-shirt for the election.
They're not supposed to do that?
No, that...
Gonna ask you to hold that for me because we want to flush it out a little more. We'll be right back on Insight. Welcome back to Insight, the political ombudsman, and she'd have me tripping over these things. Every time I'm thinking, no, I should say political ombudsperson. But there you are. We were on to perhaps three of the areas that you think that you get the most pushback on.
Right.
The first one that, traveling in a truck, handing out money and T-shirts. You're saying that's...
Yeah. I mean, it's a breach of the agreement and declaration on political conduct, which was signed in 2005 in Gordon House, the cathedral of our legislation, by the political parties. Yes. And in the very first section of the offenses talks about non-violence and non-intimidation, and specifically, candidates must not use funds derived from any source, public or private, to improperly influence electoral choices.
Yes.
And we would consider giving money to people to vote or not to vote to improperly influence.
Okay, so that's one area that you think that they're flouting the law and you want to bring to book, and it sounds like you need some CCTV.
I need CCTV. I do have 14 police officers, one in each police division, who I rely on to give me support in the field. But we did try in a particular case for them to investigate and come back, but we were not able to get
Yes, the evidence. Yes.
That would allow me to act. I mean, you could equate with that, for example, if I illegally put up streetlights in an area because I want the people there to think they have streetlights.
Yes.
And that's one of the conditions of their
illegal.
vote. That would be an improper use of public resources
yes.
to influence political outcomes.
Yes. What about roadworks and bushing?
Roadworks and bushing, of course, that's part of the work that the government does.
That's right.
And that's something welcomed by everyone, politicians and other folk. What must be clear, though, is that the reason for the work is not to advance a political agenda.
The timing of the work.
It has to do with timing, who may be employed in it, who the contractors are. And this is where it creates a bit of a dilemma, because this is now the work of government, yes, as distinct from the work of a party.
Yes.
And so when a person is a minister, they would have signed the code when they were running for election, and then you get appointed, and then you do an act that's inconsistent with the code. Yes. It's still, when you become a minister, you're expected to remember what you promised as an MP.
Yes, yes. So I've heard of money laundering, this political laundering. You, on one hand, you agree to it, but when you turn the big man, the timing is a little yes, skewed, if you may. All right, what's the
that's a vexed, that's a vexed, yes, continuous issue, yes, and we have to separate just doing the right thing, public works, which we're entitled to, from using that power of managing it to create a problem.
Would you agree that, like the putting up of paraphernalia, yes, that there ought to be a limit, that it ought not to be happening at a certain time, should it appear to? Because justice must not be done, but must manifestly appear to be done.
That is really difficult.
Yes.
Because there are many factors that may intervene to delay works, to make works necessary at a certain time. But if those who are making the decision about works and agencies accept that there are implications to their decision, they need to now determine whether because people no fool. So if the public looks on and they believe it is being done improperly for a political purpose, they too will have something to say.
We hope so.
We hope so.
We hope so.
But the two other toughies for me, and they're more frequent, one is political utterances.
Political utterances.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, what the code that was signed in Gordon House in 2005 says at 4, party officials, including platform speakers, should not make statements which are inflammatory or likely to incite others to confrontation or violence, that constitute slander or libel, that are malicious in reference to opposing candidates, their families, and party officials. So we've been hearing a lot of, they're the most corrupt, they're more corrupt than we, that one is a liar. And we understand what's happening and we understand the space, but a preference, I think, for my office and for the people of Jamaica would be specifics. Yes. Right? We believe that the action that was taken on such and such a time in relation to this breaches the global standards for corruption, yes, breaches Jamaica law, so and so, and we think this is something that entity ABC and the police should investigate.
Otherwise, it's a race to the bottom.
It's a race to the bottom.
Who's more corrupt than who? Who's more smelly than who?
Exactly. And I think...
But do you have a role there, though?
I do, and I believe that there's something that imminently will have to be done in relation to those two specific issues of the corruption talk as distinct from evidence of corruption, yes, right? And the use of pejorative language like liar and so on to describe one another. In my own, I feel uncomfortable even using the word here. That's a word I do not use, liar.
Yes.
Little children coming up in my family and so on, they say, tell liar. I said, you will not use that word. Because it becomes a problem, yes, right? Because, as you say, it's a race to the bottom. And we, the public, look on and think, no, those people, can they really represent me? As educated and as powerful, as important they are, is there another way that they could help us engage in the issue that's actually beneficial in solving the problem?
Yes. But does your remit take you into how they behave in Parliament?
there are strong rules in Parliament to
Yes.
govern Parliament.
Yes.
And so, although I've seen a number of things in Parliament,
It spills over.
I've chosen not to go into that space because there are others whose duty it is to handle that. When the issues in Parliament come into the media and into the public domain, then I have a comment, and I might even write to people in relation to those. But Parliament really has a duty to manage itself. And you know, some countries have not evolved recognizing that they're in people's living rooms and bedrooms.
Yes.
And dining rooms and in school rooms.
Yes.
And our Parliament, unfortunately, has on too many occasions seemed to have lost sight of, whether it's individuals or a number of individuals.
Is your office still relevant?
Well, last thing I want to talk about is political tribalism.
Yes.
And you will recall that the Simmons Commission report on the event in West Kingston in 2010 talked about garrisons.
Yes.
And that unless we were able to get rid of the garrison phenomenon, not just in a political sense, but in a cultural sense, then we would have the risk of facing these kinds of problems from time to time. Political tribalism relates to when we take people out of jobs that they're perfectly qualified and legally entitled to be in, and then we, the taxpayers, pay the rest of their contract because we think they're political, or because we have a person we are more comfortable with, we want to give a public job. That's different from those positions that are political positions. So you can have your advisor. You know, there are a number of positions that allow ministers to
Yes.
bring in their people. I'm talking about the public service, whether statutory bodies or
Yes.
civil service. And there are a number of things, you know, over the years. If we're going to provide $10 million to do things in 63 constituencies, should it be divided equally?
Yes, yes.
Or should there be
Yes.
some, you
Based
know,
on
some
weighting.
Is there weighting, and
Yeah.
what would that weighting be? Is the weighting the title of the holder of that
Yes.
constituency?
Yes.
These are the political tribalism issues which are still embedded, and which I believe this office has had quite a good result in helping to create discussions with those who are involved around these matters. And some of the discussions are robust. When they come in to see me, people come in, sometimes I've had people come in with 3 lawyers
Okay.
and other team members because they feel attacked. My job is not to attack politicians. My job is to help them do what they promised to do, so that we may avoid maladministration, so that we can build a country that is built on principles that we all say we respect, so that economic growth, social growth, cultural growth, Vision 2030,
Yes.
and a population that feels that there's not a percentage that's on the outside looking in, while one party is in power, just waiting for the chance to be on the
Yes,
inside
to hit out of
looking
the
out.
trough.
Yes.
Yes. The political code is voluntary.
It
They
is
both signed,
voluntary.
P.J.
That's
Patterson, then Prime Minister, and
Bruce
Orrit-
Golding.
Bruce
Bruce
Golding,
Golding.
then opposition leader,
Right.
signed
Right.
in the, what you call it?
Cathedral.
The cathedral of our politics.
Yes.
But that's voluntary.
Well,
They can take it and say, Madam,
Yeah.
bam, bam, bam,
the
I'm
parties
not
can get
signing
up
this.
tomorrow. Well, a few individuals have chosen not to sign, and interestingly, some of them have been outstanding in some conduct that is not necessarily
I
good for
wonder
them.
if I know anyone. Like
Well,
that.
I think
Anyway.
you know the public has seen some of them.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons that there have been recommendations for several years now that this code should be legislated into the Political Ombudsman Interim Act.
Yes.
And that for some of the breaches here, there should be established penalties for breach.
Yes.
So
Would
for-
you like to see
I would like
established
to see,
penalties
I would
that your
like to
office
see,
can?
yes. I would like to see established penalties that you know beforehand that if you put up 40 small signs and they're up after the election and after you've been asked, that you're going to be charged $3,000 for each one, and that you're going to have to pay that fine.
That would put you in a position of what? Being a judge?
Well, this is part of the dilemma. I do have the powers of a judge of the Supreme Court for the purpose of bringing in witnesses.
You can subpoena.
I can subpoena,
Okay.
which judges don't do, but I can bring them in and use the powers of a judge for the investigation. I can use the parish court to deal with people who may refuse to come in, may obstruct, may tell me things that are not true. They can be fined 50,000 or up to 6 months in jail. But that is not for the original offense. It is for failing to.
Oh, it's all like a bench warrant. If you fail to come to the court,
right.
you have disrespected the ombudsman.
Precisely, precisely.
Okay. But you would like to see something ahead of that.
Some of the offenses that are named in here give rise to consequences that are known beforehand, so that once we establish that you have breached, then there is an automatic penalty. There has been some discussion, of course, about the right to make recommendations to the DPP, to ask MOCA to do investigations. I think even if the law does not specifically say that, any Jamaican has the right to say to the DPP, I've learned so and so, I believe a criminal offense has occurred. You know, here's what I have, what can you do? Well, but I don't want to focus on, it's important to have those powers, but most important is for politicians and Jamaicans to know the code and to believe that these things are things we want to see. Where can we see this code? Is it on your Facebook page? Thanks to our partnership with CUSO. CUSO, a Canadian volunteer sending organization. We've had a fantastic communications advisor who has developed a Facebook page, Twitter account, Instagram account. And thanks to the media, in the traditional media, I've been able to, bring a lot of this matter forward. So JA Political Ombudsman is a Facebook page. I hope everybody goes there. I can tell you where I found it. Yes. The Office of the Political Ombudsman. Beautiful. And it will come out. It's hard to be easier than that. Yes. So, and I was able to go on and see some of the voicing, the videotape, if you may, of what occurred recently with the 13th anniversary of the political code. Yes. So you could. Do you think we should have changes in these political code to add, take out, think perhaps that may not be relevant anymore, and. I have not seen anything in the code that has been so overturned, that we have so embedded contrary behavior in Jamaica that we don't need to still remember all of this. Yeah. So much is said on the political platform, sometimes unthinkingly. So Michael, I might go on the platform and I say, John, my candidate tonight, told me to do so-and-so and I've done it. And John told me to do so-and-so, and I've done it. And it is hyperbole, perhaps. But it is also saying someone who does not have the legal authority has instructed me to spend public funds, and I'm lionizing them here on the platform. Yes. So what I find is that sometimes people are not thinking. These are highly intelligent, and I'm talking about both emotional and intellectual intelligence. Our politicians, they are making a big sacrifice on behalf of Jamaica. We are not hating on them. No, we want them to be even better than they are. And I'm telling you, there's an idea that people have that some of this behavior, that attracts people. No, it keeps your base. Yes, indeed. And even your base you might lose. I want to thank you so much. From the Hampton School for Girls to the Office of the Political Ombudsman. And that's her journey so far. And here's hoping that you got a full insight as to how that office functions. We certainly would have a lot more to do, but alas, time has taken its toll on us. And so until next week, Michael Sharp wishing you pleasant viewing, and to say, Madame Honourable, we hope to see you next time when this is in the Constitution. Thank you so much. So I'll be here next year, God willing. Yes. All right. Bye-bye.